Have you been contacted for service to the nation of Egypt, and would you serve in public office in Egypt if called upon?
I haven't been contacted recently, Tom, and I think right now, with what's going on in Egypt, it's very important for people inside Egypt to step up. This is not a situation where people from the outside can come in, whether they are people who were living in Egypt and went out, or whether it's foreigners. This is a situation where the Egyptians have to find a way to get over what is a very tragic, dangerous, and sad situation.
You wrote 30-some months ago for Bloomberg View about an Egypt that is not helpless. What is the situation today? Is Egypt helpless?
So what you're seeing today is the dark side of the political awakening and what has followed. So remember, revolutions tend to do well in dismantling the past, but have tremendous difficulty rebuilding a better future. And Egypt is trying this pivot, and it is having problem. It is having problem because there are no institutions to anchor this process. It's having problems because society is polarized, and it's having problem because the economy is in trouble. So what you're seeing there is the difficulty of this revolutionary pivot.
One of the shifts I see is the Islamists beginning to discuss the Coptic Christians, 10% of the Egyptian public, as someone pushing forward this violence. Is this a religious war, or is this a political war?
This is a political, social, economic, and institutional dislocation. So it's across the board. You know, nations need anchors, and Egypt, unfortunately, did not build sufficient anchors during the period of repression, and is now trying to build them on the run, and is having difficulty. Having said that, Tom, it's really important to see the sunny side. It may not be very shiny right now, but the sunny side of the political awakening is what's happening at the grassroots level. If you speak to people there, they'll tell you there is so much more involvement at the social, at the civic level. We're talking about health, education, about new entrepreneurs, about professional networks that are being formed. In the past, no one did that because they didn't feel they owned the country. They felt like landless peasants in a country that was run for the privileged few. Today, there's a very different sense. So if Egypt, and it's going to be really hard, Tom, but if Egypt can get over this process and find national reconciliation, what's happening at the micro level is significant and speaks to a better medium term. But the immediate future is a very uncertain one.
You're advising President Obama as chair of the President's Global Development Council. Dr. El-Erian, when you look at the projection of U.S. might and power towards Egypt, it really seems it's coming down to what do we do with $1 billion of aid? What would you advise a president to do about our financial assistance to Egypt's military?
So I think the role of the U.S. and the role of Europe is much more than the financial aid they give. In fact, the financial aid that's given is peanuts compared to what comes from the Gulf. I'll give you an example. We speak about the billion plus that comes from the U.S. What 12 billion has come pretty quickly from Kuwait, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia.
So if that's the new math, Dr. El-Erian, are we even part of the dialogue?
We are, and we should be, because what we bring to the table is much more than dollars. What we bring to the table first, each Egyptians respect and admire the U.S. in general. Second, there's a lot of information, know-how, expertise about how other countries have navigated this revolutionary transition. So the U.S. can help. And thirdly, just helping these grassroots movements. They need a lot of assistance in terms of setting up institutions, etc. So there's a role to be played, but let's be clear, this is a role where you inform and influence, but not a role where you can dictate. This has to come from within Egypt.
As you know, decades ago, there was a British academics on the Middle East, on Palestine. I think of Harani, I think of John Gelvin out at UCLA, and others. Mohamed El-Erian, we were the police officer for a while. The British were the police officer, certainly in Dubai and Abu Dhabi and the United Arab Emirates. Who's the police officer now? Do you look for Saudi Arabia or the UAE or Qatar to step up and take power in Egypt, either in a direct or indirect way?
So this notion of a police officer and this notion of a global police officer, I think, has become outdated. And it has become outdated first because of the political awakening that's happening in nations, but also because technology and social media has completely shifted the power from the macro to the micro. So this is no longer about being able to run societies from the top, and certainly no longer about being able to run the global economy from the top. Okay, what we're seeing is now it is the bottom that's being empowered, and the institutions have to evolve, and that's what Egypt and other countries are having difficulty evolving institutions. The institutions have to evolve to this new reality.
You say in your book, When Markets Collide, understanding the new destination. You have written, others have written about the poverty in Tunisia and other Arab states that has led to this unrest. What can be the new destination for the impoverished of your Egypt?
So Egypt had two problems. Okay, one is it wasn't growing fast enough, and secondly, the benefits of growth were going disproportionately to the better off. And that is why, if you look at the income distribution, or if you look at the poverty numbers, over 40% of the population is below the poverty level. The revolution was about bread and dignity, or about social justice, in addition to economic prosperity. So it's absolutely critical. Now, there are a lot of easy gains. I mean, that's the irony when you look at Egypt. There's a lot of easy gains. If you simply reform the subsidy system, which right now subsidizes the rich, okay, you can help a lot of poor people. So there's lots of easy gains, but nothing will happen before you get a political reconciliation.
Futures negative 14, Dow futures negative 122. With the carnage in Egypt, it's difficult to speak of. But Dr. El-Erian, there is a market effect. Do you link Egypt to your new normal and to a tepid global economy, or is Egypt a separate moment?
I think Egypt is somewhat linked, but a separate moment. What you're seeing in markets today, and it's important to talk about it, is a number of factors. First and foremost, the disconnect that people got used to and were comforted by, which is don't worry about the tepid economy, companies will do just fine. Both Walmart and Cisco today question that. So Cisco laying off people, Walmart talking about less traffic, talking about payroll tax having an impact. So this disconnect that the markets were very comfortable about, okay, is no longer as strong. Second, there is a strong sense, and Bill was on one of your shows yesterday, and he put it 80%. There's a strong sense that the Fed wants to step back, that the Fed no longer wants to increase the wedge between weak fundamentals and very high asset values. So combine the fact that people are starting to question this disconnect and the fact that the Fed put is no longer perceived as strong as it was before, and you get the across-the-board sell-off. I mean, it's interesting today. It's across the board. You're not seeing a flight to quality.